I think there's a lot of good conversation.
Trying to remember everything too. Can't remember everything. Yeah, or yeah, like, oh, you wanted to write it down and you wrote it wrong, you remembered it wrong.
Right.
What did they say?
So I can give just a quick, and I think several of you have seen this and even had input into it.
I will.
You don't necessarily have to have time limits. So one thing that I did just want to make sure, we have, I think, 8 or 9 of these scheduled. And I'm sort of anticipating that any week now, the state is going to come out with more guidance, and then it'll be in the news again, and then people will gather their attention. If that happens and there's a sudden swell of people in, we'll just have more sessions. So, these I think are healthy for the community to just get together and talk. So just a quick little bit of history. I could find the Warriors referenced in a 1937 yearbook. I didn't necessarily go back farther once I found that, simply because the point is the Warriors have been around for a long period of time. It's not something that was perhaps just come about in the past couple decades. So we're talking, 85 years plus. The logo that has been associated with the Warriors has changed over the past 50 years. Around 2001, the district went through a process of looking at the identity again and the logo. At that point in time, Education Commissioner Mills put out a little bit of a softer push for districts to remove Indigenous mascots. This time, it seems to be a much stronger push. I don't want to say push, requirement to do that. So in 2001, the district essentially, from what I can see, reaffirmed the identity as a warrior and decided to continue on with the logo. So just a quick little, history as far as the logo itself. The one on the immediate left is prior to 1978. The one next to that was developed or designed, drawn by Carson Waterman in 1978. And after that, there have been, I would say, countless iterations of that in one form or another. Sometimes it's applied to various sporting equipment. I've seen the Warrior head on a golf ball or both a golf ball and a bowling ball. So the circle becomes that. So there's all sorts of iterations. It's been incorporated into the Warriors, and then about a year ago, this time, the district started to look for something that would also represent Salamanca and could be utilized at a place where perhaps the Warrior head wouldn't necessarily be appropriate. And there was some conversations about 2 years ago about the Warrior logo and where and how it's used. And then it should be placed in a position of respect, not necessarily, stuck on a beer koozie that we might sell for a fundraiser. So that was where we came about and said, well, maybe we need to take a look at a different type of a letter. And there was a push at that point in time to emphasize Salamanca as well. So that was the letter S, which was popular in the 50s and 60s on many of the uniforms and yearbooks. So we sort of brought that back. The intent was not to replace the Warrior head logo at all, simply to have another identifying mark that could also represent Salamanca district. So a little bit about why we're here, just quickly. I think you all know this. November 17th, the state had put out a memo saying we have to eliminate Native American mascots. On the first, they didn't really clarify. They just gave out some more dates saying that it'll be a permanent rule on May 3rd. There's a public process by which 60 days have to be out for comment, and then they vote. The intent of the new rule will be that by the end of this school year, so June 30th, school board will have to commit to eliminating Indigenous names, logos, and mascots. So by the end of this school year, the board has to say, we're going to eliminate the logo or the name. And then they have 2 years basically have all of the imagery and names and everything go away. So, there's a piece of this that we're not overly concerned with because that's several steps down the road if we end up going down that road, but some districts, there's a pretty significant cost that's associated with replacing perhaps sections of turf, track. I mean, there's tiles in the wall with our Warrior logo on it. The name is everywhere. So for some districts, that it may be much fewer, maybe less North Indians. I don't know how that could survive. They've got a relatively significant process to go to eliminate that over a period. We have worked very closely with the students. We had representatives this afternoon from our Student Activist Club, as well as the Seneca Youth Council, which is now referred to as the Ellen Coalition. Yes. So they were at the table with me this afternoon. We've also worked very closely with the student government, who has developed a series of questions. They are going to be surveying every student at the high school electronically. And then on March 9th, so we just decided that they named the March 9th. I'll get you the times. We don't have all of the details, but we'll get that. Of course. The students will actually be running forums in school for other students to come, just like this, and hear what people have. So, one of the opportunities something like this presents is how can we use it to teach our students how do we change things in a civil and appropriate way. And that's through open dialogue and conversations and input gathering. So they're going to follow a similar process. And I'm looking forward to sort of working with that. That's what we all get education. So these are basically some of the questions that they have is, what does it mean to be a warrior? Do you identify with the term warrior? Do you have concerns? What are your thoughts over our current logo? Do you identify with the logo, and do you have any? And that's basically the questions that the students put together. And then, depending on how they answer it, it gets longer, shorter, and so. So that'll take us up to sort of this afternoon. This afternoon, we had a terrific forum. It lasted the full 2 hours. We had approximately 30 individuals, including Carson Waterman, which was a pleasure to have. He spoke and he actually came and we'll pass this around. Actually, there's a couple. Presented a sort of updated version of the Warrior logo. So he spoke to his design of it in 1978, the transition from a native logo that had a Western style headdress to one that more appropriately and accurately represented the history of Seneca. So, and then he actually updated that for us. For our design. How are you, man? Hey, how are you? Didn't recognize you first.
Logo.
This is the logo.
Okay.
Are you for logo or title set? Logo, yes.
Okay.
Well, we have a lot going on tonight. I don't know. So, you came at the perfect time. You get done with my boring part. I just finished, and now I'm about to say, well, what do you think? So, at this point, I guess sort of the question is, and really, I have zero say in this other than to ensure that we have a transparent, open process and all voices are heard and that we end up working with the board to get the right decision. So this is your time. Please let me know what your thoughts are.
So, that to be honest, I've heard this story so many times, but when that first one came out, that was 2002. And essentially, the long story short was that we did everything very quickly, but we went to the city council, the board up, private council, actually been a formal student for that was 20, 21, 22 years ago. In that process, I would estimate that we spoke to at least about 200 people. And in that 200, well, the students had more of a diverse response. But in general, the adult population, different organizations, only one person said change. There was a real strong reaction from the athletic here that were warriors, that history, championships, that Tyler Heron said to me was very emphatic. Don't you change that? So, long story short, again, is we decided to maintain what we had. People found the logo culturally appropriate. There was just very little reaction, response to change. And if I hold true to my view, 27 years ago, I still feel that way. But again, I'm not this generation. I'm back a little bit, and I'm person did a really good job. So that's pretty cool. Got it, had it, and maintained it. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm not saying not judging the scenario. Saying that as a native, it doesn't bother me. But I know the younger generation does have concerns. And my little research since the second one came out, the third one, some of the young people were saying that we should add cynical movements. It was sort of cute actually the way just maybe it needs to go upgrade. Okay, we can do that too. So, but I haven't heard any really hard reactions. But it didn't go really. But I haven't been to all the schools. There may be some. So, to end my little take on it, it's like we fought for it 20 years ago. We did take we used to go to Albany. All the school districts that had named. I did go to one that sort of got beat up a little bit by the other southern nations because they felt like giving them a season. I held my ground and I told them what I did, and my response to them essentially was, I said, from what I understand, our way of making decisions is based on consensus. I've got like 200 people that only you'll know. That's almost real consensus. You know, so I just went with that. We actually had special federal counsel about it. Which was always discussion. I would say that I but expressing what I'm impressed by this. The person updated it. I'm glad that he came forward and stuff like that. Our decision-making process is always the kids in the future. I don't see those harming or jeopardizing the future of harming the children. And the idea of using this as an education process, that's what we should.
Thank you.
I have a lot to say, so I apologize if I get too much. You can tell me to settle down. First of all, I want to say, I obviously want to keep, I like the updated. I want to keep the Warriors. I feel like if we, to I don't think it's anything disrespectful. I think it's something, and I know a lot of people said that we take pride in it. That's like my biggest flex when I go anywhere. It's like, oh, I live in Salamanca, I'm a Warrior. I live on a clinic for soccer reservation. So many people are like, oh, it's like, to me, the biggest flex I have. Yeah, that's me. I live it. So, and I take pride in it. And I stuck around, and I want to be part of Salamanca until I retire, and I don't. But I do want to keep it. I do think it's paying homage. I've talked to some kids in the class. There were who also said like the thing about bringing in a girl, like why do we have to when we're playing our sports, girls sports, you know, whatever, why do we have, but man, oh, you should say that at home. I can't say that at forum or else they're too shy or whatever, they don't want to kick up fuss. But I've heard some girls mention this. I'd like to also say, I believe everybody feels like they're a warrior. The whole like that and I feel like I cannot believe how far that it's gotten in Salamanca. I see it at the bottom of so many emails and like, yes, we are warriors. That's what we are, and it means so much to me. I never want to change. Maybe I didn't have as much to say, or I'm forgetting something more. I don't know. Too much.
Trying to how to write down cheers. I can cheer around here.
Yeah. But like, it's just, I do like, I get so like emotional about it. And like, when I'm talking at home, like, I don't, like, I'm like, and I get all loud and my kids are like, what are you yelling at me? We're not yelling. I'm just like, emotional about it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm passionate. I just think like being a warrior. That's what sounding is. That's like, that's us. No matter if you're in sports or not, that's why the whole ... and I'm a warrior came about, because the kids that are in drama club and they're not into sports, who cares? You're a warrior. You're into playing the esports, who cares? You're a warrior too. So we brought that in to show that all the kids that even if you're not in sport, you're still a warrior. You're here, you're a warrior, whatever it is you choose, if it's sport or an extracurricular activity or a club or whatever, you're here, you're a warrior. You're a warrior. You're a warrior for life.
Let me try to say this. I went to Rwanda, so technically.
You're a panther. As long as you're not a cougar.
So in the time that we moved there in 19 to now, this community, the whole community, has been so welcoming to me and my family. I have a definite relationship with Salamanca. Right? And as a son and family, I have that relationship with our land, that relationship. So I become very attached to this area. Idea of a warrior. It does. It means a lot. There are those who say we don't have that word. Right? Here's the home. It's very special. Very special. For me, this whole really talk about it. For me, home. Started the nonprofit and stuff. People supporting health. All those things. It's been there. We have really not the same. We have so much potential to develop this area. So, if being a warrior is being united.
Where is the state? Forgive me if I missed that part.
No, there's a significant amount of ambiguity over the whole process. And that's a little bit of why, so November 17th, the first memo came out that it has to go away. Very little clarification. There's a sentence in there that states that there's a possibility that you can keep indigenous mascots or references with the, say, the blessing of a tribe. That's all it says. So they would say a local tribe could be anywhere. I get the sense from some folks who have had conversations, and I talked to the assistant commissioner who is in charge of this right after that came out. And her statement to me at that point in time was, well, that phrase was put in there specifically for your school district. I said, oh, well, that's great. I said, do we know when, like, this is going to be solidified? Like, what is an indigenous term? What's not? I mean, warriors, is that a term that we shouldn't use according to their eyes? And they said further, of course, further guidance is not. And that was months ago now. So I deliberately sort of delayed this a little bit so that I was hoping to have some additional guidance by this point in time. But we don't. I don't know. They seem to have backed away from that comment. I know other districts because I'm getting questions from other superintendents to say, hey, listen, who should I contact in the Seneca Nation for them to say it's okay to whatever, say the Indian. Which my response was, don't send anybody that letter.
Better not.
It's kind of shocking, I guess. And, personally for me, it's, I've been here for 8 years and I've learned an incredible amount over those 8 years. And now I see some things that I probably did or said that just what I used to say or do, that now I did that or said that. It's a full different reflection of having been educated and learning. And now it helps me see some differences with what other districts are doing. So, but to answer your question, we don't really have guidance at this point in time. As far as we have a timeline, which tells us at the end of this year, the board is supposed to make a commitment to getting rid of Native American logos and mascots. And then there's 2 years from that point on time to have it all go away. Whether we will be, well, first off, we have to come up with, do we as a community want to stay the Warriors with our logo or not? So, at a previous session, someone said, well, if you're not going to be the Warriors, what would you be? And I'm sort of steering away from any of those conversations at this point in time, because first we have to decide, are we staying or not? If we're not staying, okay, that's a whole nother. If we are staying, then we have to figure out what the state is going to say. And I really want to venture if they tell us no, where that will put us.
Here and
Okay.
tell the state just to come on down here.
Ooh, yeah, Right.
They won't
Well,
So-
what they'll do is they'll cut the funding.
go back in. No, I know.
Yeah, so where I'm not even entertaining, I'm putting that out of my head at this moment, because first we gotta, let's go step one. Are we going to stay the Warriors, and are we good with our logo? And we'll come to hopefully consensus on that. Our process is, we're, at this point, we're very early in this, I'm looking at this as a marathon. First is to just hear what people have to say, just like sessions like this. There'll be opportunities for written format. People have I have phone calls from people, I have anonymous letters that have been sent to me. None with white powder just yet, but you know, everything has been very friendly, up to this point. So we're gathering all of that. All of that will be compiled and be completely made open to the public. Hear what everybody else has to say. And then, we will gather a group, we will work hand in hand with the Senate Commission. I feel as though the Senate Commission has been put in a frustrating position, right? I mean, they didn't ask the recipient of all of these letters and a possible judge of who can and who. So I'm sure there lots of information is going to them that they didn't look for. I'm hoping the state will come up with guidance that will say, this is, you know, these are the terms that are not going to stay, period. You know, whether it's whatever. And that would eliminate a lot of problems for you. So once that guidance comes out, I think we'll have a better direction as far as where we're going and how fast we can go. Our student government is ready for that part. Oh, so we've also really engaged the student government. Student government is surveying all the students. They're holding student forums like this at the high school level. And then some of those student leaders are actually going to go to Senate Intermediate and really do more of a presentation about what's happening. We really look at this as a learning. The other thoughts?
Tyler Herron made a good, an important point. And he talked about, there's a word in Seneca, and he said it here. And it's descriptive, and what it represents in understanding of Seneca's, it represents warrior, but it's descriptive, and what it says is to stand up. And the other comment that I shared was that alongside the vocabulary word warrior, there's the word protector, defender. The scope is larger, and it isn't just human beings. We are protectors of Mother Earth. We are protectors of the water, the air, and with the pollution and environmental issues. We have a lot of our people across Turtle Island, coast to coast, that are very active in environmental issues as protectors of the water, the land, anti-fracking, destructive poison of that water that's used to do that fracking process. They suck it out and dump it, and they wanted to dump it in the Allegheny River 5 years ago. So the Pagulas made their money to buy the Buffalo Bills from fracking. And so people in the headwaters of the Allegheny, and some people here from Allegheny, a few from Cattaraugus, they met over there and they said, we want to protect the river. That is the definition of standing up. And the other comment that I shared was that you look up wars in Europe from the year 1000 to 1499. There were over 350, 360 wars that took place in Europe. We know it was small bands, groups, and maybe they weren't countries then, they were kingdoms and colonies. They had so much war before the Spanish came here in 1492. They already had a long history of war, and they perfected war, science of warfare. And our people, we were able to be defenders and protectors, and we had wars. Back to that 1,000-year time, there was a peacemaker that came here, and he united the Mohawk Nation, the Oneida Nation, the Onondaga Nation, Cayuga Nation, Seneca Nation. We had been fighting with each other. There were blood feuds. There was retaliation. On and on and on. He came, the peacemaker came, and stopped that with the great law of peace. We're told that there was 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, the peacemaker walked among us and brought the great law of peace. When the French came, it came from the Atlantic Ocean. It came up what is now the St. Lawrence River. They met the Hurons right away, and they began to trade. And the French in the French world, all the European world, they had developed metal skills, making metal, different kinds of metal. And so they had tools. They had iron pots to cook in, pans, tools. And the Hurons wanted to trade right away. And so the French made friends with the Hurons. When they came and they met the Mohawks, the peacemaker had already organized the great law in the minds of the 5 nations. And the Mohawks said, we can't trade until the whole 52 chiefs and clan mothers say yes, consensus, then we can trade. The French said, no. Our king in France, our king said that you must trade with us. And that behavior goes back to the doctrine of discovery, where they felt that they would come to this hemisphere and that we were heathens, pagans, and that they could subjugate people here. And so the Mohawks said, no, it has to go to Grand Council. And in the literature, they killed 3 Mohawk chiefs with early firearms, those blunderbuss guns. They killed 3 Mohawk leaders, and everyone scattered. And the word spread through the Confederacy, and the French became our enemy. All the way out here, Seneca territory on the Genesee River. And in that history, we still need to remember the peacemaker, because we fought, but
There are people whose responsibility is not to talk about war. And our chiefs are peace chiefs. And they speak about resolution, working things out without war. Then people have asked, well, what about when the French came? And I'm good at some numbers. In 1687, in Nonville, a French leader had an army of 2,000 soldiers, and they burned four Onondaga villages, Seneca villages, destroyed the supply of corn, bushels, baskets of corn that were stored. Corn was the currency of trade. They burned the corn, they burned the crops, the fields. And our people then made that stand. But the chiefs were still peace chiefs. And it was war chiefs that made the decision. And today, when our chiefs are speaking, someone will come up and say, well, you're peace chiefs, what do you do then? If New York State attacks your sovereignty, the state troopers, the peace chief says, I have nothing to say. It's automatic, turned over to the war chiefs. That's their responsibility. I stand for peace. And so, to be a peacemaker, be a football player, basketball player, a cross player. That's incorporated in some healthy ways. For Albany to hear that Salamanca has peaceful coexistence in their educational environment, and even the curriculum reflects that respect. In that one screen on the state, the second one, the State Ed Department issues a follow-up memo with a proposed timetable, the new rule to be permanent, that by the end of the school year, local school board commits to eliminate all indigenous names, logos, and mascots by the end of the 24-25 school year. All indigenous names, logos, mascots will be eliminated. That's been the goal of Europeans. The French tried to eliminate us. The George Washington tried to eliminate the Senecas. In 1779, the Sullivan's campaign to eliminate the Senecas. And all the names of Seneca is gone. Who else is talking that way? And I shared the example. Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida. He wants to eliminate Black history from the state education curriculums in their school. He wants Blackness to go away. Just like there was a time when they wanted us to go away, to speak English, to assimilate. We're still here. And so if that message, and I'm sharing this, if that message could be discussed, and it's just the bones, the skeleton, have a discussion to put the meat on those bones and say, this is how it's going to be. That there is a peaceful way to educate our children. And the warrior name can be healthy. You can be a warrior against poverty. You can be a warrior against substandard housing by low-income families in our school district have to live with. You can be a warrior to stand up for sobriety and drug-free way of life. You can be a warrior to stop diabetes, to do cancer cancer prevention. Be a warrior. And so yes, it's bigger than sports. It's being a human being. Stand up. And so this is just one voice. We need more of the voices to reach as much of a consensus as we can have. And in Washington, one of the mocking criticisms that's thrown at our leadership is, you Indians can't get anything done. You fight with each other. You fight with other nations in your state. You can't work together. Look what's going on in Congress right now.
Yeah, the
And they
government
tell
gets along
us-
so well.
They tell us this. And Peacemaker brought the great law of peace. And there were two things, and maybe Flip, he's worked with the chiefs and with our teachers of the great law. But two things the Peacemaker brought us, and we're told that the Peacemaker that came here was Huron. On the other side of this Lake Ontario, in Toronto and that area. The Hurons, that's where they live. And in that, developing, and it's a strategy, developing that strategy for wellness, for healthy relationships. And in 70, 80 years of American school curriculum, it's called citizenship. That Salamanca can say, here is contemporary, healthy, and very clear, appropriate way of standing up. Now look at this. Governor DeSantis wants to eliminate Black history, Black names, Black culture. How many others far-right conservatives in this country have that thinking? How many of them are on the state legislature in New York State? Senators, representatives. Some are county officials, county supervisors. How many would want to see us to go away? So for us, that isn't new. We think of our children and the children they're going to have, and the grandchildren that will be born, and the great-grandchildren that will be born, on and on. That is the depth of our thinking. And the planning reflects that. So the other school districts in our teachings, we're all related, we're all connected here walking on Mother Earth. All those other school districts are our relatives and share this cultural thinking with the other school districts, so that when their athletes come here, they know, they understand who we are, how we would like to compete on a sports field, in a basketball court, at a spelling bee, at a science fair, science projects, contests, that to do that with peaceful coexistence. I worked out west for 44 years. I moved there in 1971. I grew up here. And I went through the Kanzu Dam era. So angry. And I went to Mansfield. No, Mansfield University. Then it was Mansfield State College. Played football. You know, I was treated with a lot of racism. My first day of orientation on campus, when all the freshmen, we all get together and we put our hands on each shoulder, make a big line, you do the bunny hop, you put on a beanie, and all these, orientation things to get ready. And 3 football players asked me, who am I? Who are you? Are you Chinese? Are you Puerto Rican? And I said, no, I'm a Seneca. He said, what's that? I said, I'm an Indian. Right away, they went into their Hollywood stereotypes, very racist and shouting, dirty Indian, dumb, stupid, savage, stupid redskin, drunk Indian. What are you doing here? These were Pennsylvania kids that did not grow up around an indigenous community. They were from Altoona, Pennsylvania. They were from coal mining towns. They were top football players, these guys. I played with them. But that was their response. They had to unleash the stereotypes they had learned since they were children, watching cartoons on TV, watching Lone Ranger. And I went through racism. And one of those football players hit me. I was boxing then. I couldn't get a fight. There were no heavyweights then. The Golden Gloves in this area. So I trained for 2 years. And so when I seen that punch, it was just a quick movement. He missed my face and hit my shoulder. And I looked at him. And I turned around, stood there, and they kept laughing at me. And there used to be a joke in the 1970s. It was at the National Congress of American Indians, when all the nations organized to help each other and then to not get pushed around by the federal Washington, D.C. system. They organized nationally. One of the jokes was that there was this Indian family. The white guy came and he saw they were Indians. And he came and he attacked them. And he raped the mother and killed her. And he killed the kids. And when the man came home from work, his family was killed. They told him who did it. So he went hunting that man. That man knew he was being hunted, so he traveled all over the country. This man just kept tracking him down. He went all through the West. And he was always 3 weeks behind, 2 months behind, where he had got a part-time job and he was gone. Finally, he was way up in Alaska. They told him that, oh, there's a man like that that came here a month ago. He's working over there. He went up, he saw that man. And he walked up. He told him who I am. He said, it's my wife and my children who you murdered. And he jumped on him and threw him on the ground. And he's holding him. He says, I've tracked you for 2 years. And I wasn't gonna stop till I got you. Now I got you. And don't you ever do that again. He left. That was the mentality of our people. You could abuse our people in the 50s and 40s. And we just put our head down. He said, don't do that again. You would do it, you do it again. You do that. Yeah. That we had developed this passivity. We didn't stand up. And as you go out west to the other territories and visit, you still see remnants of that behavior. And in education, they talk about esteem, self-esteem, self-efficacy. And that students may get abused by an aggressive teacher. The student doesn't stand up and they will tell their parents. Then the ones that do tell their parents, they put their head down too. And they don't stand up. And so there's enough people that go to school here. There's enough parents whose children go to school here. There's other people that live here that live here all their life. They're part of that consensus to say, this is us. Tell New York State, we're not going to eliminate our name and even eliminate the name Seneca Nation. We're here. We made a treaty with the Dutch. 1712, 1612, 1613 with the Dutch. The 2-row wampum just went up. We still follow that. There's 2 paths, 2 ways of life. But we're neighbors. We're not going anywhere, and neither are white families going to go anywhere. We're neighbors. We have the education department in Albany. Comprehend that. This is the education that they'd like to see school districts achieve with character education. A healthy character as a student. So it's a good day. So warriors, one of our parents says, well, what about the women? Women warriors. Out west, there's societies of women warriors. And they have songs for women, the women warriors. They tell about the 1800s, 1700s, when they fought the cavalry. There were women that could ride a horse, that would ride in the battle and fight. Very rare to see a woman in battle on a horse, back of a horse fighting. But they witnessed in their own nation, they have stories of those women. With the Navajo, there's women's names that are warrior names. The last vocable in the name is Ba, Kinaba, Desba, Nesba. All these women warrior names, and so there's women that have that as their first name. Everyone knows that's a woman's warrior name. In Iraq, there was a Hopi woman that got killed in battle. Her name Lori passed away. She got killed in Iraq. And the Hopis are known as peaceful people. They couldn't find her body. But they had taken them, the captured American soldiers north. And that's where they found them. And they got them released. And they said, Lori's buried way back south of Nasiriyah, Iraq, near a hospital in a shallow grave. They went and they recovered her body and they brought her back to the city. She was my neighbor. Her dad was Hopi. He is Hopi. And he's Bear Clan, Hopi Bear Clan, and Seneca Bear Clan. We called each other brother. His children called me grandpa. I was Lori's grandpa. They renamed a peak in Phoenix. There's a peak in the mountain. There's Camelback Mountain, and there's another peak. They called it Squaw Peak. You know what squaw means? The word squaw comes from the New England area. Those nations met the Pilgrims, the early colonial people that came from England. When they first came, they didn't bring their women, it was the men. They like Indian women. What squaw means is vagina, private parts of a woman. And so squaw was a name that they just passed back and forth. They laughed. And they called our women squaw. John Wayne movies, he uses the word squaw. Ski resort out west, they have a Squaw Valley. Phoenix, they had Squaw Peak. And they didn't know, they were ignorant. They didn't know that it means vagina peak, vagina ski valley. We thought it meant something about honoring our people. We're honoring them. And they changed the name. Since we have a Pueblo woman now, Secretary of Interior in Washington, she's worked to remove all those names that have squaw. Here in Salamanca, we played baseball. We met Mo John. Mo was a great baseball player. And he hit a home run in Betts Park over the top of the pine trees in the outfield. He was good. Then the Minnesota Twins had Harmon Killebrew. They had three guys that were like, they call them battleship role, batting lineup. Mo John could hit. I played baseball. I was a pitcher, played first base, outfield. I had an arm. I could throw from outfield all the way to home plate. My junior year, I went out for baseball. And they got a new coach. And the shortstop was a senior, and I was a junior, and not many seniors that year. But he used to call me Squaw Man. So I'd be at practice or I'd be in the locker room, and I'd hear Squaw Man. I'd look. And I didn't say anything. I was passive. I'd just gone through the Kenzu Dam experience. Our house was burned down. You watch those films, what's the name of it? There's two films that are made.
Yeah.
Land of our ancestors. The very first house that was filmed burning by the Army Corps of Engineers was our house. They told us there was a film about Kenzu Dam, we were watching it. Here, the first house that they showed burning was our house. There was two Army Corps of Engineer guys leaning against a car, watching our house burn. I was in 8th grade, 13 years old. By the time I was a junior in high school, that was boiling inside me. I used it in football. I wanted to play baseball. In practice, I hit a home run and I was coming around second base, and this one guy that called me Squaw Man was standing there. When I come running by him, he says, Squaw Man. And I looked, and I walked over and I punched him, dropped him, the black guy. The coach, the third baseman, was his son, and his son and this shortstop grew up together. They were 1 year apart, but they were buddies. The coach came over from working with some of the other players, and he saw his star shortstop with a black eye. He said, "What happened?" He said, "Dennis hit me." And he looked at me, and he squared off, and he doubled up his fists. The coach said, "You know what I want to do to you?" I said, "Yeah." He wanted to hit me. And I'd already been learning how to box. And I was waiting. And he held it back. He says, "You're kicked off the team." It was made to Seneca guys. His classroom was just down this hall by the side entrance. That was his classroom. He coached the rifle club. And there was a rifle range in the basement. And on our school bus, a lot of Seneca girls went out to the rifle club because some of them grew up hunting with their dad, their uncle. We hunted to live for food, substance, lifestyle. And the girls that could shoot, they joined rifle club. They'd lay on the mat, shoot from a line position, and this teacher, this coach, would lay on them, put his arm around them, and hold the rifle, and he'd rub his body against them. And the Seneca girls would tell us in the school bus what he did. And they had rifle club once a week. So once a week we'd hear that about this teacher. He liked Indian girls, but he didn't like Indian boys. That's his story. It goes back to 1492. And I got picked off the team. So all of us, we have these stories to say this is how this school used to be. This used to be a study hall. And the teacher, he was like a type A personality. It's like he wanted to be a New York State trooper, but he didn't make it. So he took it out on us. He was very firm. This was his study hall. Seneca's we'd come down the hallway, and we'd be talking, but he'd be standing out there, and he'd be rocking on his heels. We'd be watching students. When we saw him, we all get quiet. We walk on by. Then you start talking again. I told you the teacher that asked me, don't your parents love you? In front of all the kids. You know, that's what we went through. Plus the Kinzu Dam. In November 1973, Dallas, Texas, President Kennedy was shot and killed. We were mad at Kennedy and the Kinzu Dam. Kennedy had told us he would stop the Kinzu Dam and help us. There's a letter in the museum here from Kennedy. It's on display. All that time he was lying, he was shaking hands with the governor of Pennsylvania. He needed that vote from the steel workers, from the coal miners. He needed the labor vote to win. He came up, President Kennedy told us, I'll help you. We'll stop the Kinzu Dam. And all the time he signed off on it. And so when Kennedy got shot, the principal announced it on an intercom. He said, I'd like to ask the teachers, you know, to keep your students in the classroom. We have an announcement. This afternoon, President John F. Kennedy was shot in Dallas, Texas. He died. The teachers start crying. The kids start crying. Seneca students start laughing. They said, yay! And they were looking at the students that were crying. They were, ah, ha, ha, ha. And they looked at the teacher crying, ha, ha, ha. And the teacher couldn't believe it. Was shocked. She was shocked. And I sat there. My mom and dad taught me to not be bitter, not be disrespectful. And I knew if I laughed with these other Seneca kids, everyone crying. My dad would whip me and punish me. Kennedy was asked by the news media, what about the Senecas? What about the Kinzu Dam? They'd already gone to federal courts. We lost the appeal, the highest federal court. Kennedy didn't want to answer. He said, Mr. President, what about the Senecas? What about the Senecas? And he stopped and he said, I believe the courts have spoken. And he walked down. So when you see that film, they showed it at the Seneca Theater. I think this was like 1989, 88, 1990. And I was home that summer from living in Arizona. We come back every summer. And I went in there to see the movie. And our elders were there, our old timers. And after that movie was over, it was just quiet. This one elder, he was almost 90. And I knew his voice, and I heard his voice in the dark. He said, I will get my gun. That's how we felt. But we didn't. Not till Cuomo in 92 we stood up on the highway. You know, even then, our people were scared to stand up. And so we talked today about COVID. 4 years of COVID has brutalized, traumatized children. And they missed a year of classroom learning. They stayed home. They got behind. academically, intellectually, we're lagging now. And we're saying some of them may not catch up to the grade level. And, wow. That was another thought, the student services. Even before COVID, with education budget cuts across the country, and Biden's speech talked about higher salaries for teachers, raising salaries, people voting, you know, and gotta have that work to people want to be in education as a professional, as a compassionate, healthy, empathetic human being for children, and some of them they nosedive math in their math. By 5th grade, we know they're not going to make it through junior high. They will be gone by their sophomore year. You can see it coming. And we can see it in 1st and 2nd grade. And look, the fate of students. And the blessing, my superintendent started me at the high school. They said, good. We need you to work with these students before they're really struggling at the high school level. We need you at the junior high. They sent me to junior high. I worked there. Then the primary principal said, we want Dennis here. K through 3. I work in the primary, work in the intermediate, work in the alternative school. I could see in the primary the eyes, the look in the eyes of some 1st and 2nd graders that could help them not have them nosedive in 5th grade, not lose it in junior high. You could see it then. That quality of preparedness for our student populations, and they're varied economically in their home situations. With all those variables to be a staff that's a crackerjack right on staff, you know. And we want you at our school. Come to school every day, you know. There's Senecas that they'll be reticent, they won't come to a public meeting like this. So we work together and reach them in other ways. That's the puzzle we were always trying to solve in Arizona. Reach them inside their home. Some of them won't come to parent-teacher night. Some of the men were abused in boarding school. Some of them have said, I'll never go to school, talk to a teacher. You know, they send their wife, mother. Well, where's the father? He's not coming. He was traumatized in boarding school. So there's history, and that's not all the same. There's so many variations to what degree that it was traumatic. So now we got dispensaries. I spent a whole career dealing with substance abuse, chemical addiction. Their own people are drug dealers now. Oh, smokes. Mohandas K. Gandhi talked about commerce without conscience and suffering. It's a consciousness. So warrior is it's kind of not that important. The welfare of our children is good for me. We can figure this out.
Yeah.
We're compassionate, we're smart.
Well, thank you, folks.
I feel good. I've been home 10 years and I wanted to find a time, a way to meet you. At the senior center, we had us old folks had a training on Alzheimer's and early dementia. I took care of my dad when he was 98 years old. He went 2 years ago on Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th. He's a World War II veteran. I took care of my brother-in-law. He went. And at this Alzheimer's training, they said we stopped using the word caregiver. We use the word care partner. Because the person that we're helping teaches us compassion, listening, patience, endurance. Empathy. So, your partners. Wow, all this time I've been saying, yeah, I've been a caregiver with my dad. He taught me so much the 10 years I was with him every day. Care partners. The students teach us
Every day,
every day.
every day. Some of that stuff you're talking about.